watching a YouTube video the other day, and the creator was talking about victimology and the victimology of the victims in the Idaho 4 unalivings. Let's first be clear that there's a difference between a profile and victimology. Victimology takes the profile and then incorporates psychological and sociological patterns. Now, a good example would be the victims of Jack the Ripper. The profile would be that they were women, that they were schmex workers, and that they were typically from a lower class background. Now, what does this mean in terms of victimology? Because they were schmex workers, that meant that they were usually out at night alone and therefore easier to isolate and get into dark, secluded places. And because they were women and schmex workers, if they happened to escape Jack the Ripper, they'd be less likely to go to the police. And because they came from lower class backgrounds, that meant that they weren't being targeted for their money. And because they were schmex workers and because they were from a lower class background, that meant the investigation probably wouldn't go that deep. And that it would be less likely that somebody would go looking for them. Another aspect of the victimology could be that many of Jack the Ripper's victims were mutilated in some way, which could indicate some kind of loathing or rage. If we were going to try and determine the victimology of the victims of the Idaho 4 unalivings, the focus would be less on individual physical traits and more on how they were perceived by the offender. Now, Ethan, unfortunately, I think he was just wrong place, wrong time. But the other three, victimology would be they all belonged to sororities, which meant they probably were very social and out at night a lot and probably liked to drink and probably liked to party. Because they were conventionally attractive, they were probably perceived as having a lot of romantic options. And because of those habits of going out, partying, drinking, those patterns, that behavior would make them vulnerable. And it's that vulnerability, along with accessibility and desirability, that plays a role in how an offender chooses their target.